This story was submitted by Michael. This happened in 2005, just before my 14th birthday. My dad had been sick with leukemia for the majority of my childhood, so I guess my way of dealing with it was to join the military cadets kind of thing. Civil Air Patrol, I think it was called. I was on this thing called Ground Team, which trains us in things such as navigational skills and other outdoorsy stuff in order to be in the field and locate down civilian aircraft. We live in the metro Atlanta area, in a town called Lawrenceville, so to get into a heavily wooded environment, we would have to drive for about an hour east towards Augusta. Our team normally consisted of 6 people, including our flight leader, but on this particular exercise, there were only 3 of us. When we found a place to park, we noticed an old white pickup truck in the woods. Normally utility/ranger trucks are white, but this truck was too old and beat up and had no markings on it. We found it strange because we never encountered anybody on our excursions. We found a spot to camp, about half a mile from the van, just in case there was an emergency. We hiked throughout the day, and it was about 5 p.m. before we started heading back to camp. This was in early December, so it was twilight. For those who don't know, twilight is one of the worst times to be in the woods without artificial light, because your eyes can't adjust to the light. We always tried to maintain our night vision, so we didn't use our flashlights. As we were heading to our camp spot to set up, we heard what sounded like a 4th set of footsteps trailing us. Our flight leader whispered for us to stop, and it sounded like the footsteps stopped as well. Our flight leader was 40 years old, and a retired Army infantryman. Definitely not somebody you would want to fuck with. Seeing as how we were 14, we only had some knives to cut rope and such to defend ourselves. I'm Dominican, so I definitely wasn't interested in getting tangled up with any of the locals out this way. He motioned for us to slowly start moving again, but to step gently to make as little noise as possible. We slowly started moving, and the footsteps started up behind us again. They were definitely bipedal and stepping in a way that was trying to make as little noise as possible. We got to the opening of the trail that led to the van, and we were told to stop again. It was dark by this point, and although I hit it well, I was freaking the fuck out. Our flight leader told us to stand away from the trees in the middle of the campground, and he stealthily moved into the woods. A couple of very quiet minutes passed before we heard him shout, "Hey!" and heard somebody running back into the woods. Our flight leader came out the trail behind us and said, "Get to the car, right now." He wasn't yelling, but his voice was such that we knew he was serious. My friend and I took out our flashlights and bolted down the short trail to the car, with our flight leader right behind us. When we got into the van, we locked all of the doors and got the hell out of there. When we pulled out, we noticed that the truck was still there. Our flight leader shined his flashlight through the window and took the plate number before we took off. The nearest place to stop was a Waffle House about 12 miles away, so we pulled into there to get something hot to eat, and he called the cops. He told them what had happened and gave them the plate number, but I don't know what became of it. He then told us what had happened when he went into the woods. When he moved into the woods and shined his light, he saw a scruffy-looking white dude with medium-length hair who bolted. He suspects that the guy was either doing or cultivating drugs of some sort, since we were in the ass end of nowhere. My father died shortly after this, and I ended up quitting, so I never went back, nor do I have a desire to go back. This story was submitted by Bradley. This story takes place about 6 months ago in Geelong, Australia. My cousin and I are really close, and at the time of these events, we were both 16. We're practically brothers, we don't really refer to each other as family, more mates than anything. I recently moved into a new house at the other side of Geelong, but when I lived about 400 meters from my cousin, we hung out a lot. One day we were at my house, and we were talking about conspiracies and stuff, and eventually he started talking about how he thinks he's being followed by a van. I didn't take him seriously, because I'm pretty sure he was only being half serious when he first told me anyway. But as the days went by, he told me he keeps seeing this van when he's walking around. He told me that the van usually drives past him, does a U-turn further down the road, and drives past him again. I still didn't think anything of it, because he's a bit paranoid at times. It also doesn't help that he's on drugs every now and then, including ice. But my cousin wouldn't let it go. He kept telling me he thinks he's being watched, saying that he's also hearing a car idling outside of his house at night every now and then, before driving off, and sometimes returning 2 or 3 times in one night. Now I started to take him a bit more seriously. On this particular night, me and our mate Colin were both staying at my cousin's house for the night, because his mom and her partner were going out for the night. After his mom and partner had left, Colin tells me that he had also seen the van while he was with my cousin, and told me that it drove past, did a U-turn, and drove back past them slowly, before turning into a street about 50 meters up the road, and seemingly waiting for them. Obviously, they decided to turn around and avoid the van. Good choice, I think. I asked them if they'd bothered telling his mom yet, which they hadn't. I don't really blame them. She never really believes anything my cousin says, which is usually funny, but in this instance, it was kind of annoying, because now I'm worried. It got late, and we were all chilling in my cousin's room, when all of a sudden we heard the sound of a car idling outside. I initially think nothing of it, until my cousin says, "It's here." We all look out his window and over the side fence, and we see the top of a white van lit up by the streetlight. Now I was scared. We started panicking and figuring out whether or not we would bother calling the police, considering we were home without adults. In this area of Geelong, police sometimes fail to even show up for pretty serious calls, even domestic violence, so we doubted they'd act on, "There's a suspicious van outside our house." But before we could come up with any sort of plan of action, the power went out and we heard loud bangs at the door. Not knocks, bangs. We knew immediately that they were trying to break in, so we all got up, and I ran past the door that they were banging on so I could get to the back door. I looked past the window as I ran, and I saw 4 men, lit dimly by the streetlights, all in black, wearing masks. I saw one of them holding a bat, and another holding a big one-strap bag. I made eye contact with one of the men, and I nearly passed out from fear. It was the single most terrifying moment of my life. I focused back on sprinting, and as I reached the back door, I heard a smash. They'd broken through the window. I wasted no time and sprinted outside, leapt over the fence, and ran, taking note of the plate number of the van. I forgot it instantly, but I'm still pretty proud of myself for thinking to do that in such a rush. When I was sprinting down the road, I turned around and saw 2 of the men chasing after me, but about 10 meters behind. I don't mean to brag, but I'm a quick sprinter, and I'm pretty fit, so being caught wasn't much of a worry for me, considering they did look out of shape. Big bodies are very intimidating, but not really much of a match for a race against a 16-year-old with a 100-meter sprint time of 11.67 seconds. As I reached the corner, I turned around, and I saw that the men had turned around as well and were running back towards the house. At this moment, I realized I was running alone, and my cousin and Colin were still inside. I stopped running, and I stood at the corner looking towards the house, which was a fair distance away. I saw the 2 other men get out of the house and hop in the van with the 2 men who had chased me, and then they sped off. I quickly ran back to the house, opened the power box at the front door, and flicked some switches. The first thing I saw was glass everywhere, and a knife, a bat, and a taser left by the men. I called out for Colin and my cousin, and thank God they replied. Their reply was coming from my cousin's room, so I busted in, and they were coming out of the closet together, both holding a machete and a knife that my cousin keeps in there. They tell me that after I ran outside, the other two men raided the house while they hid in the closet. The men didn't take much, only an iPad and some bits of jewelry from his mom's room. They told me that one of the men entered my cousin's room, and after looking around for a bit, shouted, "I don't think this is the right house," followed by sounds from the other room where the other guy was. The two men then quickly left the house, and that's when I saw them all hop in the van and leave. We have no idea who they were, what they wanted, or why they were so fascinated with my cousin, but I'm glad they decided that his house was the wrong house. To this day, we have no idea what happened, and the police are still investigating. We did come up with some theories. Mine and Colin's favorite is that my cousin resembles some junkie who they were after, and in the darkness assumed I was him, not expecting others to be home. Despite being 16, my cousin is tall, and looks pretty sketchy. Recently, the Victorian police arrested 4 men in Geelong for raping a 14-year-old girl and assaulting a 16-year-old boy. We inquired about their possible involvement in the events that took place at my cousin's house, especially after we found out one of them lived in the area. They denied their involvement, so apparently it was 4 other men. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. In case some of you may have missed it, I uploaded a video very early this morning, so I'll have a link on the screen as well as in the description so you can check it out. That one might have snuck by some of you. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check out the description on information on how to submit your stories. Now for the first story. Thankfully you had a leader that knew what he was doing and was able to pay attention and get you guys out of the situation. Most of the time it is someone who knows what they're doing, but occasionally you get some idiot. Thankfully you didn't have to figure out what that guy was doing, though your leader was probably right. He was probably just checking you guys out to make sure you weren't touching his stash. A lot of people look to go out into public areas to grow their crops, because then they can just abandon it and there's nothing on their hands. So you might want to be careful if you ever go out to those woods again, not like you said you wanted to. I'd also like to send my condolences about your father. I'm really sorry to hear that. Now for the second story. I too am wondering what fascination they had with your cousin. You said that he likes to experiment with drugs, so maybe in one of his meth capades, he met up with someone he shouldn't have, who maybe thought that he had more money than he did. Regardless, it's a pretty scary thing to have to go through, especially since you don't know what the hell is happening. Fortunate for you, you were able to get out of the house, and fortunately for your cousin and Colin, the people breaking in weren't after them, otherwise that would have ended badly. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you tomorrow for another video, and just remember, it's always scarier
if it's true.